Absolutely. Because it's usually unresolved. As you know, people they push it down or they self-medicate. They don't want to deal with the trauma, so they don't do it. And then they don't realize that that's going to show up in relationships. And when you have trauma and it's unresolved, it shows up in many different ways.
Hi, and welcome to this next episode of Just Healing. I am so excited about our next guest. I have known him for years and we've worked at different places, and he just brings such joy wherever he goes and such a strong background in research and supporting everything that he says. So I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Greg Canillas.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Good to see you again.
It is good to see you again. And tell everybody what you do.
So I have a company called Soul to Soul Global. I'm the CEO of Soul to Soul Global. We do couples retreats for LGBT couples, and we do something called a Symbis assessment for all couples. It's an online computerized assessment. They take it separately, and then we get together and unpack it via Zoom sessions. We also do couples and parenting coaching, specifically for LGBT parents with LGBTQ children and adolescents.
Yeah. And you also do a lot of research on different things too.
I do. So I've done some research. I'm one of the 8 authors of the American Psychological Association's guidelines for working with people who are queer identified. And then also I've done like a number of presentations, probably honestly like 300 presentations on different areas, including trauma, substance abuse, working with BIPOC individuals, etc.
Yeah. Yeah, and your background's extensive, and you always do so much for the community, and like you make it so like I don't know, like conversational friendly, and you're giving them like knowledge and information, right?
Thank
And
you.
so when I contacted you, I said, let's talk about this or this. And then we came up with talking about the DL, the down low, right?
Yeah.
And so why don't you tell people what the DL is? Because people are like, what's that? And then there's people like, oh yeah, I know.
Yeah. I think everybody knows now, but DL is down low. So men who are I guess, gay identified or bisexual or questioning who operate on the down low. So they may see or be in relationships or date same gender loving men. And this also applies to women too, but more commonly associated with men. And they are not necessarily out. And sometimes that complicates things for men that I've seen in couples coaching or individually.
Yeah, and a lot of times they're married and they have families and right? And so there's a lot of variables that go into that, right?
Yeah, sometimes they're married and have families, and sometimes they're single and just not out. And that complicates things as well.
Yeah, and I remember a time I had a friend and he was in the grocery store, and I remember
Hmm.
this guy approached him and he kept saying, "I don't know, I'm feeling very uncomfortable." And I said, "Well, I think he likes you or whatever." She goes, "Well, I
Hmm.
know that guy, like I know he has a wife and I know he has whatever." I said, "He's trying to see, like test the waters. Maybe he's on the
Yeah,
DL." And he goes, "What's the DL?" I said, "Well, right?" And so, especially in the Black community, the DL is common, and there's some cultural components to it too,
yes.
because I mean, sometimes you have groups of men who hang together.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes there are men who are also DL, and that's the kind of like social group. I don't think it's so common just to African Americans. I've seen it with Latinos. I've seen it with Asian Americans. I think any culture where coming out and being gay or bisexual has been taboo, especially communities that have been associated like religion. Those communities have, I think, the phenomenon, DL phenomenon, so to speak.
Yeah, it's because there's such a taboo, and especially in the world today, people are going more and more in, right? To not being their authentic selves.
Yeah, I think with the current like political climate, there's more of a pushback. So possibly people aren't going to come out in the way that they were doing like maybe 5, 10 years ago, when it seems to have shifted, where people are much more accepting for LGBT. I think like if you look at statistics, most of the country, I'm talking about the U.S., is supportive of LGBT folks. There's just a small minority, but that small vocal minority is the one that's now shaping policy. So people are, I think, less likely to probably come out now because there's so much anti-queer, anti-trans rhetoric circulating in the community now. the larger community.
Yeah. And do you think there's like a cultural component? I know we were talking before, like, people being under the radar, but then, black people, we want to shout our stuff, our trauma from the rooftops sometimes, right? So
Yeah, sometimes.
I see you talk about that because people don't realize there is a cultural component to that.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a cultural component. There's a cultural component in the whole phenomenon. Keep people keeping that suppressed. That's we shoved everything else from everything else from like the rooftops. That's not necessarily something that people shout from the rooftops, being gay or lesbian,
Yeah.
bi, or questioning, because I think of the cultural component and the historical ties to the African American church, whether people practice or not. I think religion oftentimes influences people culturally. And so I think that people are less likely to shout this particular issue out. Hence why we have the down.
Right, right. And I think the more they're tied to the church too makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I think so. But I think, I teach a clinical practicum. I don't know if you know this, and I've taught it for like 2 decades at the university. We talk about how people, therapists, don't really give a lot of attention to religion. But whether you're practicing or not, it usually shapes how people view themselves and their place in the world. So I have students who will talk about, well, this person used to be Catholic or they used to be associated with the Baptist church, but they're not. And I'm like, well, did you ask about that? Did you ask about religion and its impact on them? No, and it happens to be a religious school, so I just find that to be um, ironic. But whether you are tied to the church and you're active or not, I don't think necessarily makes a difference. If you grew up in that kind of community and environment, you carry that with you, whether you're practicing or not, if that makes sense.
No, it's like nature and nurture, right?
Hmm.
So, and your nurturing environment shapes what you do. It shapes who you are, right?
Hmm.
And how you view yourself, the world.
Exactly. Exactly. So I think people can be impacted by it, even if they're not actively participating in religion.
Right. And participating in the shame that comes with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So you work with couples and families, right?
I do.
Yeah. And so what happens in that relationship when you're working with couples and family when someone is not being authentic?
So that shows up whether we're talking about the DL or not. I think that there are people who don't show up as their authentic self, and sometimes that has to do with trauma. A lot of your work is being on trauma, and people not resolving that trauma, and it's showing up in their relationship, and them not really being aware of it because a lot of times it's unconscious. But if you've had a trauma background and you don't talk about it, you haven't explored it, it can show up in various ways in the relationship and usually negative ways in terms of trust, in terms of like openness with your partner, those kinds of things. So I think it shows up a lot in the work that I'm doing.
How do you push through that?
Well, I don't push through it. They have to push through it. They have to be willing to be open to, I mean, I can guide you, but you have to be willing to acknowledge first that that's an issue. Because a lot of people they don't want to acknowledge that they have an issue or problem, as you well know. I mean, you're a psychologist.
Mhm.
So people don't want to necessarily acknowledge it. So acknowledging is the first step. And then looking at how that shows up and connecting it to um, past family of origin history or relationship history that may have been traumatic, those kinds of things. But they have to actually be willing to do the work, as you know. We can only be guides for that work. If you're not willing to show up and do the actual work, nothing ever really changes.
Right. I often tell people I'm not going to work harder than you,
Exactly.
right?
Right.
You've been in the room with those people and you're like, "Oh my god. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh my god."
Yeah. We're trying to do that. We train to do that in therapy programs, and then we trained our students to do that, not to show up and do more work than the person in the room. One, for you as a therapist, it can be tiring and taxing.
That
I know,
that's an understatement.
yeah, I know some student therapists who become quite irritated by that. I'm like, well, you're doing more than they're doing. So you have to make sure that they understand they have to do the work. But sitting there and
Right.
talking is not enough for people in
No. They have to practice
coaching or
it.
counseling. Exactly. Exactly.
And just to let you know, there's a little bit of delay in when you're talking, so that's why I'm pausing because
Okay.
I don't know if you're experiencing it, but I'm experiencing a delay. So
Okay.
but and it's interesting because you're working in therapy, you're trying to guide them and they may not have revealed to the spouse, right? So or the partner.
Hmm.
How uncomfortable is that?
Not uncomfortable for me, but
No,
uncomfortable for
they're
the
in the room.
person.
In the
Yeah, in
room,
the
how
room.
uncomfortable?
Absolutely. Yeah, it can be uncomfortable. But, I think part of what I talk to people about when they're coming for like couples coaching is that you have to be authentic, you have to be open, you have to be willing to hear what your partner says, so that they feel like there's a safe space. That's important in therapy, that we create a safe space for them to be
Mhm.
able to be their authentic self. Because I think a lot of people are not really their authentic self, and
No.
I think that's a larger discussion, which we may have time for some of that now. But
Yeah.
I don't think people grow up to be their authentic self, whether we're talking about the down low phenomenon or not. So it's really creating a space for them to be open and to listen. One of the other things I tell students is, one of the big issues, there are three issues in relationships that usually bring people and in crisis. And do you know what they are? Let me see if you might know the three.
Teach me. Teach me.
You'll know when I say it though. So
Okay.
money,
Okay.
sex, and communication.
Yeah.
And money, two savers are great together. A saver and spender, not so good. And two spenders, disaster. So usually people come in around that. Sex, people don't talk about it. Most of us don't grow up and give talk about culture and religion, don't grow up in families that have, conversations around that. And so that becomes a problem because usually they're mismatched. Like two freaks, they're
Mhm.
gonna have a good time. But freak and the person who's like clutching your pearls, like, oh, the Lord told me not to do that. Jesus said no. Then it's going to be problematic because one person's going to want to do some things and explore, and the other person's not going to want to do
Mhm.
that. And then third is communication. And most of us don't grow up in households where we learn to communicate, especially in the Black community. Children are told you to be seen and not heard. So you don't
Mhm.
really learn how to express emotions in many of the families that I've worked with, and then my own as well. And that's true of Asian families and Latino families, not families of color that have a very strong, like patriarchal kind of, I don't want to say setup, but even though that it may feel like that's not, but that's what's going on in many cultures, particularly cultures of color. So they don't learn how to communicate. So they don't know how to
Mhm.
communicate. They don't know how to listen. They don't know how to receive information. So it makes it a little harder for them when they initially start. But there are things that we do that help them to move past that in sessions.
So that's affecting their authentic self, like coming in the room?
Yeah, yeah. Because I don't think people learn how to communicate. They don't know how to be open. They don't know how to say, hey, this is me. Will you accept me as I am? Whether we're talking about sexuality or down
Mhm.
low or whatever, they just don't know whether the person's going to be open to that because they didn't get that in many families of origin. And, not to, and this is not to poo-poo on people's parents, but most people do the best that they can what they have. They just
Mhm.
repeat stuff generationally. So if you don't break those generational curses, so to speak, then you're going to pass that on to your children. They'll pass it on to their children, etc. But people don't really know how to communicate.
Yeah, they don't, and it does get passed on, and it's funny because when I teach about, diversity and I teach
Hmm.
about, transgender and all that stuff, I
Hmm.
always ask people, "If you're in a relationship, would it matter to you?"
Hmm.
And nobody's ever really thinks about it. Like, they never think about, like, would you leave that person, would you not? I said,
Hmm.
"You know what's funny is when I married my husband, that was
Hmm.
one of our first conversations,
Hmm.
and he didn't know what to do with me because I was communicating. I was communicating things so that because we're basically making a contract, right,
Hmm.
to be married,
Absolutely.
and what does that look like for you, right?
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
said, "So if you told me that, I'd be like, I may have to adjust, but I'd be like, okay, I'm marrying the person, right? But what
Hmm.
would that be for you?" Right? He goes, "Well, it kind of matters to me." And I said, "Okay, well, now I know."
Hmm.
Right? But if you never have that open discussion and you're not able to because you're not taught to do that,
Exactly.
then that's when you get surprises, right? And that's
Yeah.
when people feel betrayed. They
Yeah.
don't feel like they can tell somebody something, like,
Yeah. And a lot of people get surprises relationships, honestly, because they don't have those conversations.
Yeah,
Premarital counseling is not like the norm.
yeah.
When I started the business many years ago, I get recruitment emails from like some of the bigger wedding sites and they're like, sign up, it'll help you like get clients and stuff. I'm like, well, I go to look for places to put my category or put my services and
Mhm.
there's nothing for premarital. They're like, well, we'll put you under officiant. I'm like, I'm not marrying people. It doesn't work. You're not going to get me
No.
to sign up for that. Yeah, because it's not fit. But nobody's doing it. but you could
Yeah.
find like a caterer or a venue or a wedding dress or tuxedo, but
Hmm.
it's not like
That's
institutionalized. It's not
crazy.
something that we we do. So people get
Yeah.
into relationships and then they carry all this trauma, it's this baggage, and it shows up in
Yeah.
relationships because you're doing the stuff that you either was modeled for you or you're doing stuff that happened to you.
Right. Right. And that's why I tell people your first relationship, like you hear people, we met at 14 and we're together forever.
Hmm.
I'm like, I hope you grew with that person because you're just, both of you are just acting out what your parents did. Your
Yeah, yeah,
first
yeah.
relationship is always that because you don't know what to do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll tell you that there's some that have second and third and fourth and fifth, and they still don't know what to do.
Well,
Because
that is true. That is true. And then
I
I
tell
start saying, huh?
That's what I tell clients, and that's what suits is too. It's the same person. Like you end up dating the same person. They show up with a different hairstyle and a different outfit, but it's the same type of person. So your
Right.
second, your third, your fourth, your fifth, if you don't work on your own stuff and while you're attracting that person or that type of person, you're gonna get the same thing. And the people are frustrated, like, I don't understand this. I don't
Yeah.
understand why I'm with the same type. It's like, yeah, you're gonna get the same stuff. You do the same thing, you're gonna get the
Right.
same outcome.
Right.
So yeah,
And the common denominator is you. Like people
yeah,
don't really, it's you.
yeah, yeah, absolutely is. It's both ways.
Yeah.
Problems in relationships are usually both ways.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
Yeah.
some times when that one person is healed or healing and the other person is not. But
Yeah.
usually like attracts like. And so two unhealed people are drawn to one another and healed people are drawn to
So would you say trauma plays a role in the relationship and all of these things that you need?
absolutely, because it's usually unresolved, as you know, because you work with trauma survivors.
Mhm.
People,
Mhm.
they push it down or they self-medicate. They don't want to deal with the trauma, so they don't do it, and then they don't realize that that's going to show up in relationships. And everybody I know, I mean, there's some people that are asexual or don't want to be in relationships.
Mhm.
Most people want to be in relationships. They want a connection.
Mhm.
It's a part of our DNA, so to speak. We want to be with other people. We want to be part of community. So everybody wants it. It's just people don't know how to get it.
Yeah.
And when you have trauma and it's unresolved, it shows up in many different ways. Avoidance of conversation, intimacy, just a number of ways that are going to affect the relationship and outcome.
So how do we heal from all this?
You have to, I think, acknowledge that that's what's part of the issue. Again, I don't think a lot of people do that. But if you had that experience, you've had trauma, and trauma is, that's the definition is wide now. It's not um, what we used to think. It's much more expansive, and so that can be in anything. That you've had any issues or trauma that's unresolved, you have to acknowledge that that's part of it, part of your background, and move to do the work preferably before you're in a relationship. Although sometimes that can happen, you can resolve it in a relationship because if that other person, your partner, is open to healing themselves and helping you to heal, it can work. But both partners have to be open to it.
Yeah, it takes two. It's both sides. There's this
Absolutely.
famous actress out there who I watch, and I won't say who it is, but I'm sure you can figure it out. And every time she breaks up with somebody, like 2 weeks later, she's got a new man, right? And then one
Right.
time she went back to a man that she broke up with like 15 years ago. You never go backwards because you're
Right.
trying to get something that you had before, right? And you're
Is she
trying
from
to
the block?
huh?
Is she
Yeah,
from the
she's
block?
from the block. Yeah. And I'm just
I
like,
might know who
"What?"
you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, people don't understand that either.
yeah,
Usually it seems cute, seems fun, because you did love the person probably and
yeah,
probably still do.
yeah,
But if you haven't healed the stuff that was problematic for you and they haven't healed the stuff that was problematic for them, it's the same thing over and over again.
yeah.
It's repeat. So I
It's
don't
not
think
gonna
that worked
last,
out. No, it's not. I mean, yeah, not general.
and it didn't.
Yeah.
Did you? You were writing something recently on your blog too that I found
Mhm.
very interesting. Why don't you tell people about that?
So there's a lot of things on the blog. Is there something that stood out for you? Like the last one, I think what I
What?
posted yesterday was like green flags, things to
What?
look for. Green flags.
Yes, I think that was what I was reading.
Was
Yeah.
that it? Okay. So because some of the other ones are like red flags.
Mm.
It's previous weeks that they were talking about like trauma or how that shows up for people.
Mhm.
But the green flags are things like being open to having conversations, the person understanding their trauma, their history, just being open with the process and wanting to communicate. I think those are green flags. But people's real from the red flags.
That's why I thought it was so unique, because everybody wants to talk about, oh, you got run, girl, all that stuff, right? But they don't
Yeah,
say that you need to stay, right? This is
yeah,
a green light. This is
yeah,
good, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
no one talks about the good that tells you that this is something that could be something positive for you. They always talk about what's going to be negative, right? And run
Well,
the other way.
you know what? Because this brings up an interesting question that comes up a lot. I don't know if you've watched some of the dating shows, like Pop That Balloon,
Yes. Oh, God.
Married at First Sight, all of those,
Yes.
which I think are they're part of the culture now, but I think they're quite disastrous because they give people the impression that that's the way to find a perfect mate. Like Pop That Balloon is physical. Like usually they're popping balloons
Yes.
because they want the person's outfit.
And you hear
They
the
ignore,
noise.
yeah, they ignore like the person. I've seen guys come on and they're like, yeah, I have this business. I'm like this. I'm a good person, blah, blah, blah. And women like, I don't like your shoes. Pop. I'm like, what? That's the wrong thing to look for. So I think people are
Wrong
looking
thing.
for the wrong thing. And when they see green flags, and this is where the trauma comes in, I
Yeah.
think, for people, when they see the green flags, they will pass that person up. There's this meme. I was telling a friend about this a few months ago, and there's a meme as Jesus with a woman, and the woman says to Jesus, Lord, I've been praying for you to send me a man. And he says, I did. You keep telling me he's a friend. You keep telling him he's a friend. So I've answered your prayer,
Yeah.
basically, but you pushed that
Yeah.
person on and put him into another category when I
Yeah.
sent you what you need.
Yeah.
So people do a lot of that, where they get person and they're like, I don't like this person because they're too short or they're too fat or they don't have enough education. What qualities do they have that would
Yeah.
sustain a relationship?
Yeah.
Oh, they
Yeah.
have those. Okay, why? Those are the green flags. Those are
Those
the
are
green
green
flags.
flags.
But a lot of times I think it's people's trauma and people's um, fairy tale expectations that get in the way for them seeing the things that they actually should look for. So look, I've heard people talk about, well, I have to have passion. This is not passion enough. Well, it's safe. It's safe. And I think that's what's triggering you. The safety of being in a relationship with somebody who's consistent. That's another green flag. Person who
Mm-hmm.
shows up all the time, is there, is supportive
Yeah.
versus the person who's like, yeah, I can't do that. I can't come to
Yeah.
that. I'm not here for that. Blah blah
Yeah.
blah. Those are the people that people actually run after.
Yeah.
They love the
Oh,
trauma.
yeah. They love
Trauma.
the chase,
They
you know?
well, yeah. And then they're in tears in
Yeah.
sessions or with
Yeah.
friends, and like, I don't understand why they're doing this to me. Why she does this or
You
he
allow
does
it.
that, or why they cheated on me. And like, because you picked the red flag. Not
You
just
allowed it by picking that flag, like,
right.
and it's like I always say, I'm not going to chase nobody. I'm not, and I can do bad by myself. I'm not going to do
Exactly.
bad with somebody else, right?
Exactly.
Right. I would probably never get a date in my life if I wasn't married, because I like have such standards that aren't with everybody else. You know what I mean? And so, and
Yeah,
I'll
but
just say, well, keep walking.
that's the standard people need to have.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's,
Hence
yeah,
why you're married. That's why you're happily married because you know what to look for. Yeah.
yeah,
So
I guess so. I do.
exactly.
I think my kids will be well adjusted to that too, because I'll say, well, that's, I said, you guys, when you decide who you want, remember there's different things. There's things that are stability, right? That kindness, like
Hmm.
someone you can trust. These are all
Hmm.
things, right? That if they don't have them, you can't do anything about. But someone's
Right.
shoes, you can fix that. Go buy him some. Go get, tell him, "Ooh, baby, I like it when you wear those." Any guy you say that to is gonna be, "I'm gonna put those shoes on every day." Like
Yeah.
you say that to a
Exactly.
woman, "I'm gonna wear my hair like that every day." You know?
Yeah. 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 They get caught up in like the physical stuff, or even
Yeah,
like height and weight. Like, I mean, people can lose weight. They can't grow, but
yeah.
they can
They
lose
can't grow.
weight. Yeah, they can grow, but I see a lot of that with women who are
Yeah,
taller than men, and they'll just dismiss them. And
yeah.
yeah, so
But do they have those things that make you want to go home? That make you feel safe? That's the thing that people
yeah,
don't
it's a
get
safety thing.
for.
Yeah, especially for people with trauma, they
Yeah,
need safety so that they can talk about the trauma so that it
yeah,
doesn't affect the relationship. So that's it's super important. But people will choose chaos over
yeah,
safety.
yeah, yeah.
But that's the trauma.
Yeah, it's a trauma talking.
Yeah.
Well, man, our time is up. So, what do you want to leave everybody with?
Look for green flags. Resolve your own trauma, and especially if you're interested in relationships. Try to do that before you get into a relationship, because I mean, I think that if people are two people are committed and it comes up, you hope that they will stay together and work through it. Because the grass is not always greener. So, the old folks used to say, if you have the 80-20, stay with the 80, don't look for the 20, those kinds of things. But yeah, I think look for people who are safe for you to be
Mhm,
able to explore and be your authentic self. Don't go
mm.
for the red flags. It'll save
And
you
how
years of therapy. Don't choose the red flag.
don't choose the red flags, go for the green, go for the green. How can people get in touch with you?
People can look at the website if you're interested in any of the retreats, or the symbol assessment, or any of our upcoming events. www.soul to soul global. So it's SOUL number 2 SOULglobal.com. And follow us on Instagram, Soul to Soul Global 9. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me.
And thank you for this episode of Just Healing.